a country that has a long history of education. But when you go through our presentation, you will realize that sometimes or most times, it is not your starting early. Other people can catch up. So you can see that we hosted the first set of schools and universities in sub-Saharan Africa. But when you look at most other African countries, especially in East and Southern Africa, we are decades behind them in terms of the Nqf. So for me, for us, we are privileged to present the very day South Africa is presenting. And so we would be humbled by the very limited achievements we have. But we have a goal like looking at a country like South Africa. So we will be measuring our progress as we go along. Next slide, please. In our presentation, we have attempted to introduce a historical element so that in your quiet moments, you can read about what Sierra Leone has gone through, the ups and downs. I just want to mention two. We had a rebel war that was 10 years, 1991 to 2001. And we are one of few countries in Sierra Leone in Africa that was hit by the Ebola. So you will see that under COVID, there are a lot of lessons that we learned. Go to the next slide, please. That is a brief country profile. It's a small country. Our official language is English. Next slide, please. Next slide. You see it's a small population of 7.8 million. And like I said earlier in my intro, we have a long history of education. Next slide, please. I have mentioned this statement before. We want to move straight. Yeah, next slide. Now we move on to the attempts at education reforms. We had the first major attempt in 1974-75. But lack of political will and resources, only a fraction of those reforms were implemented. In the early 90s, following our participation at the Jumpton Conference, we introduced the 6334, 6 years of primary, 3 years of secondary basic, 3 years of senior secondary, and 4 years of tertiary. Next slide. There was a third attempt at consolidating the 6334 by the creation of 3 important bodies, the Tertiary Education Commission and the rearrangement of teacher colleges and technical institutions into polytechnics. I think we are the only country in West Africa that did that, where teacher training and TVET education are provided for the same institution as the polytechnics. And C, the NCTVA replaced the Institute of Education so that the NCTVA will certify graduates of both technical and teacher training. The essence here was to have parity of esteem. So we felt that one way of boosting the image of technical and vocational education was to have a single examination body that catered for both teacher education and TVET. We had a fourth attempt on the Mohammed Jalloh Commission, and although there are many recommendations, but what was actually done was to add a year to senior secondary school, but that lasted only for 2 years. We have gone back to the 6334. The fifth attempt at reforms came in 2018 when we had a new government with a flagship program of human capital development. And the three major things that were done was to declare basic and senior education free, was to allocate 20% of the GDP to education sector, and the Ministry of Education was then split into two ministries, Ministry for Basic and Senior Secondary Education and the Ministry of Technical and Higher Education. With regard to Nqf development, we have participated in a number of fora arising from the ECOWAS initiative, starting with the Abuja meeting on regional qualifications, certification, as well as the development of competency-based education and training curricula done by Nigeria, but now adopted by ECOWAS countries. UNESCO partnered with ECOWAS to launch a new initiative for the recognition of skills and qualifications within and across ECOWAS. In 2018, to be specific, we had two main workshops. One was the adoption of a ministerial declaration, and another was attempting to have a regional certification framework. The second workshop laid the foundation for community practice, common language for dialogue and cooperation, as well as recognition of competencies and qualifications. We also have the element of quality assurance. Now, in 2019, ECOWAS, we still moved on the development and the definition of tools and common vocabulary, on the elaboration of self-assessment reports, action plans, strategy and implementation for Nqf. And we also looked at the implication of the AU work and the related agenda to the certification and mobility of competencies. Surveys were done in the sub-region to capture the variability that exists, and an attempt was made to understand the stages of Nqf development process in all countries, and specific items that were looked at were as to whether the Nqf in each country is all embracing, whether it was comprehensive. Well, initially when we started ours last year, the discussions, we were focusing on technical and vocational education, but now we are moving towards having a more comprehensive one. We also looked at how many levels each Nqf had, and how the regulatory bodies for the various governance systems operate, what quality assurance mechanisms are to be embedded, and whether the qualifications were registered. The ECOWAS looked at also the allocation of credits in Nqf levels and processes, and there was willingness to support each country in their respective national development plans with respect to Nqf. Now, Sierra Leone, where we are, following the 2018 declaration of the flagship program as being the one on human capital development and allocating 20% of the budget. Like I said earlier, we had two new ministries one for basic and senior education, and another for technical and higher education. And in all of these, the development of an Nqf was mentioned, more articulated in the Ministry for Technical and Higher Education. and for that, we requested technical assistance from the VEX toolbox, where it's not for COVID, the consultants will have been in country right now. We also have plans to restructure the NCTVA as well as other higher institution bodies to respond to the new realities. A committee was set up, which we are hosting. Whilst we are working on our committee, we also realized that the Tertiary Education Commission was also independently thinking about an Nqf for higher education. The DFID project on strategic partnership for higher education, innovation and reform was also interested in the Nqf as part of their desire to infuse a lot more quality assurance into the systems, as well as the necessary flexibilities. Next. So what we have done in the last 3 months was that these 3 initiatives from TEC, from the Sphere project and ourselves, we have now agreed to merge these 3 initiatives so that we can pull our resources together and have a system that will be more comprehensive. We have done that, and we have agreed to now have a committee that will look at the comprehensive development of and the integrated development for a comprehensive Nqf. And for that, we have identified from the World Bank, the Skills Development Fund, some resources that can be put at our disposal. Of course, the VET toolbox is on. The Sphere project is also on. And there is a lot of commitment on the part of government to support the process. This does not only include funding. We have engaged the Ministry of Justice and the Attorney General's office so that the necessary legislation, they can support us with the necessary legislation. So the new committee is being formed, and we're in the process of developing now a roadmap that can have milestones, which we'll be very pleased to be presenting on the webinars from time to time. The last part of the slides there is talking about, now you can understand where we were requesting whether there could be shortcuts of Nqf, because we are in a hurry to catch up with the rest of Africa, and we will be very happy to have technical support in that direction. Next slide, please. With respect to COVID-19, all the institutions were closed down. We had an inter-district lockdown, except for the movement of essential goods. At some point, curfew was introduced. For schools and colleges, we made use of the radio, television, and online teaching was done. Naturally, there were challenges, but as we progressed, we were able to build up on the successes and attempt to address these challenges. New pedagogy approaches were experimented using Zoom and other platforms. In spite of all of these things we did, the academic year was not lost as far as the education sector was concerned. For primary and secondary schools, we were able to conduct the usual 3 public examinations. And for the colleges, we are now trying to round up the 2019-2020 academic year, and we are hopeful that the new academic year will start in January. Very recently, the airport was opened, and about 2 days ago, the curfew was lifted temporarily at the midst of, within the midst of the COVID-19 health protocols. Yeah? So we want to thank you for listening to us, and they will be bothering you and our colleagues in other parts of the world for advice and support as we move into this very exciting journey. Thank you very much.
Let us also give a round of applause to Mr. Jalloh and Sierra Leone for all the effort they are taking in their hands with partners, with different partners, with the different institutions, and moving step by step and asking questions as well to the peers, such as always this question that Mr. Jalloh is raising since the second webinar, I think. Is there a way to move a bit more efficiently, let's say at a quicker pace in developing and then starting implementation of the NQF? Thank you very much, Mr. Jalloh. I would like to then say that we would have now a small 5 minutes opportunity to reply to the questions we had in the chat box. Okay, I see there is another question from Jean Adotevi, and this time it is a question to Sierra Leone, to Mr. Jalloh. So, and then we go immediately after this small session to this session dedicated to Europass digital credentials. Again, thank you, team from Sierra Leone, for this presentation and for the overview. The context, where it all started, it's also very fundamental, and we don't always know exactly the roots of the problem. So I have here marked 2 questions to SAQA that were not yet discussed and dealt with through the possibilities of the chat box. So one of them is the following, and the question comes from Mrs. Abida. What relationship do all these policies, I mean SAQA, NQF, South African NQF, have with the SADC regional qualifications framework, with SADC qualifications framework and its implementation? So this is one question. I think it was not yet dealt with in the chat box directly. And there is another question, and this question comes from Mozambique, from Ida Alvarinho, who is asking, what are the means used by SAQA to verify that, for example, foreign certificates, diplomas that are requesting for recognition in South Africa have been awarded by legitimate institutions and really represent properly approved qualifications in the country of origin? So what are the means normally SAQA use to undertake this very important part of the recognition process? I don't know if Julie and Dr. Reddy and Colleen would like then to give elements of response to these 2 questions.
Thank you, Eduarda, and my apologies again to everybody for suddenly disappearing. Unexpected load shedding in my area. I will let Colleen or even Joe respond to the one about the SADC question, because they were very instrumental. I know Joe played a very key role, and so did Colleen. I will speak about recognition of foreign qualifications, and I hope I understand the question. But when we get an application to recognize a foreign qualification, the first part of the recognition cycle is to verify with the foreign qualification, foreign institution in question, So if I'll give you an example, if it's in the UK or say if it's in Ghana, we call we verify first that it is a registered and recognized institution in the country in which it operates. Secondly, we verify that that institution in question that issued that certificate that is being presented is accredited to offer the actual program that the person claims that they achieved. Thirdly, that it was issued in the name of the person claiming that qualification. If the qualification evaluation process passes that phase, we then move on to phase 2, which is then comparing it to a similar qualification on the South African Nqf. After doing quite a comprehensive comparison of the qualification with another qualification on the South African Nqf, we then locate it onto the South African Nqf, and we issue that certificate of evaluation to recognize it as being on the equivalent level of a South African Nqf qualification, and we do that accordingly. So that's how it works. I hope that's what you were asking.
I wonder, is that correct, Ida? Is it? I think it's a quite clear response from Dr. Reddy. And then I see that Joe Samuels wrote already in the chat quite an important aspect. So he underlines that one of the strategic things that South Africa and Seychelles, both countries that have already aligned fully to the SADC qualifications framework, one of the things they should be doing is to ensure that the SADC QF qualifications framework level is displayed on the national certificates and other qualifications documents. So this is exactly one of the important commitments of members of SADC qualifications framework, similar to the EQF, and this would assure this linkage between the qualifications framework, the alignment, successful alignment, and recognition. I don't know if Pauline would like to add, to change anything. And I see that Fiona added, we are moving in this direction. Thanks a lot, Fiona, for this point.
Thank you, Eduarda.
Yes, please, Pauline.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether I understood the question correctly. The question was, how do South Africa's policies relate to the SADC qualifications framework? Am I correct? I think
yes.
I think that's the question. I mean, Joe can come in as well. But when I did the SADC qualifications framework presentation, I said that we have 10 alignment criteria. Now, each of those 10 alignment criteria have sub-criteria. It will ask things like, how do qualifications get placed onto the Nqf, and so on and so on. And that is where our policies come in. Because in order to meet that alignment criteria and the sub-criteria, you have to show how these things are operationalized in the country. So that is how the policies become relevant. And if you can download our alignment report, and you will see there that we refer to all the policies, and we refer to the Acts, Nqf Act, SAQA Act, and so on. And then I'm just responding to Joe Samuel's question on the chat. You know, this is not an easy thing to do. Now, when we developed the alignment criteria, the last criteria was that all qualification certificates must display the SADC qualifications framework level. When we were piloting that alignment criteria, we changed that to say that there must be clear plans in place, because we've got 3 sub-frameworks, and each of them have different roles in terms of certification. So perhaps one quality council would like to see the SEDC qualifications framework level on the actual certificate. Another quality council might want to see it on the transcript. So we haven't fully worked out exactly in the sub-frameworks how that is going to be done. That is why we changed that alignment criterion to make sure that there are plans in place. So that is the one thing. And then I saw another question that I need to explain the difference between a qualification and a designation. A qualification is a qualification that you receive either full-time but you receive a qualification award. A designation is something that you receive from a professional body. It gives you a certain license to practice, or it gives you the right to practice. The qualification becomes an underlying factor in the achievement of that designation. So when you belong to a professional body, you have to adhere to codes of practice and standards for that professional body. If for some reason you no longer comply with that code of conduct, the professional body can expel you from the professional body and take away your designation, which is your right to practice in that field. But if your qualification was obtained legally, they cannot take that qualification away from you. So there is a distinct difference between the qualification and the designation. And then also just to add into the verification, and with the SAQA certificate of evaluation, we've got the real-time verification now where you can see immediately who has logged onto your profile, and it will tell the date and the time that the qualification was verified. But Julie is correct in saying that we contact those institutions and we find out about those qualifications to make sure that the institutions have in fact issued them. But there are also a number of other websites where you can find out information about institutions in countries and whether they have the right to operate. I hope I've answered everybody's questions.
I think so, Colleen. Thank you very much, Colleen, Dr. Reddy, for the replies. If participants would still have any comments or questions, please use the chat box. Thank you so much again, Sakwa. And there is a question by Jean Adotevi to Sierra Leone. And the question is, what is Sierra Leone's understanding of embedding quality assurance in their national qualifications framework, which was one of the points underlined by Mr. Jalloh. Mr. Jalloh, would you have some clarification to this question? How do you see quality assurance as part of your national qualifications framework?
Well, as we all know,
yeah, continue.
Yes, as we all know, when you are given an award, the award specifies the kinds of competencies you are able to exhibit in the world of work. And out of some research or talking with employers, especially those in the private sector, concerns were raised about holders of certain qualifications that don't perform as they would have expected. So the interaction with some of these private sector bodies brought out the issue of the quality of the graduates. I think it is largely because of this that the quality assurance element has been embedded into the Sphere project. It is just to ensure that for the same qualification awarded across different institutions, one should expect that they enjoy the same parity of esteem.
Thank you very much.